Yo, what's up everybody, and welcome to my first legitimate healer guide ever. Up until Dragonflight, I only played healers to try out gimmicks, and thus wasn't very good, so I didn't make any guides about them. But then enter Dragonflight, we have Solo Shuffle, which brought Healer Solo Shuffle instant queues, which brought 10,000 plus rounds of me playing healer. And now here we are. I've got 2,400 to 3K even in the hyperinflated Season 1 experience on various healers, and I would like to now use the knowledge that I've gathered and experience that I have and pass that along to you guys. Of course, there are much better healers. They play in AWC. You might have heard of some of them. But I did look through YouTube. I scoured it and tried to find some guides for the pre-patch, and I was coming up pretty short. There are guides out there, but it's just very limited. Sometimes people want multiple sources of content, so if something like my conversational style video works better for you and you're better able to understand what you're supposed to be doing, then you have that option. If you only have one option and if the video doesn't resonate with you super well, then you're doomed, right? So I'd like to try out my hand at this and try and give people information in a different way and see if it helps at all. And if it does, just let me know. And if it doesn't, let me know. And maybe there will be more of these in the future if it is something useful to you guys. Okay, that's all the blah blah. Now get into the information that you actually came here for. Disc stuff. I've played thousands of games at 2,700 as disc, and I really feel like this is one of my most complete healers. I have a build here that is very solid, very structurally sound, so to speak, and that it is easy to play, easy to understand your win conditions, easy to help support your teammates' win conditions, but also to keep things stable, to make things easier on you so you're not panicking with slingshotty health pools with your big shields that you're going to get as a result of this build. It's super fun to play, and that's the one I want to start out with. I also have another build that we'll talk about at the end, the Shadow Covenant build. You've probably seen it, but it'll actually synergize super well with the hero talents coming out in the War Within. So I have to talk about that, so you have the information going into the next expansion that might help you out when you're trying to figure out all this new crazy stuff. So the first one, unfortunately, no super cool build names for this one. Maybe I'll have them when we have awesome class fantasy hero talents, but I have a very high throughput, very stable build, and then the Shadow Covenant right now we're on the super heals. Not as great as some of my other class fantasy build names, but at least it gets the point across. Okay, so how did this build work? Well, of course, you need to lock in for it at the top. Atonement is how you get throughput. Doing damage to heal people is really going to keep a team snowballing pressure because you're adding damage while healing your team. Very impactful. Double charge of Paints Up. This is a very, very, very powerful wall, and you get the double charge from this choice node right below it, which you will always choose, never even bother choosing the other one. This is just too much value, especially in a solo shuffle environment where you want the multiple goes to be prevented by your personal defensive. And also you can get a third up because Power Word Shield reduces the cooldown, and you're going to be pressing Power Word Shield a lot, trust me. So Protector of the Frail, absolutely required. You'd never swap off of this. Then down the right side, you have your Penance buff, Power of the Dark Side. This is a little buff that will show up on your middle of your screen as to, the image, the purple image that comes around your frame or your character, and it just buffs Penance. Look for this because then you have a big Penance into a big Power Word Shield that will also be buffed. We'll talk about that soon. And then down this side, you have some Mind Blast buffs. Mind Blast giving you Power of the Dark Side is great because then you can Mind Blast into Penance and do a huge chunk of damage, which will heal everybody with Atonement. And that Penance will even be further buffed because Mind Blast is now baked into Schism. Not quite as powerful as Schism used to be, but again, it's baked into a button that you really, really want to press, Mind Blast. So it is totally fine to just have this talent completely passive baked into your rotation, which is great. Power Word Radiance is your huge AoE heal that applies Atonement for a short time. You're going to want to press this a lot. You need to make it instant cast with Ultimate Radiance, which is a PvP talent. And then you get a second charge, and you want the second charge, of course, because it's just very good, but you're going to be grabbing these things anyway. So if you go all the way down this right side, that's the Shadow Covenant build, but we're not doing that because this is a super heal build. You get Power Word Barrier as yet another damage reduction to answer goes like a big DK go that pulls everybody together. You Trinket Dome, and all of a sudden he's very sad. Of course, he can grip you out, but that's part of the counter-play aspect of this game. As a healer, you're always trying to answer their goes, and they're always trying to prevent you from doing that. Rapture has been changed. It's still a phenomenal button. When you press it, you get a huge shield on your target. So when you press it, make sure you're targeting the guy taking damage. But then your next 5 power word shields also are huge, and they have no cooldown. This lasts for 30 seconds, I think I saw in the patch notes, so you don't have it for eternity. But you will be pressing those power word shields within the 30 seconds, unless something crazy and terrible happens, maybe you DC. And each one of them is going to be huge. You generally want to pre-penance the power word shield if you can, because that buffs it from a talent down below, like I said. But there's a huge cooldown. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown, so you want to make sure you're putting this on cooldown pretty early so you can get a second one before the shuffle ends if you're playing that, or if you just to stay ahead of things if you're playing regular 3s or 2s. Okay. Reducing the cooldown of Power Word Radiance is just really nice because it's a huge button. It is a panic heal, it's an instant cast, and it is both schools, so if you get kicked on anything, you can still Radiance. That is very important to know. Purge the Wicked is the same way. It's Radiant School, both schools. And you need to keep this up. This replaces Shadow Word Pain. It's just an even bigger dot, and you need to keep this up on all 3 targets all the time, unless you're going to break CC with it. Try not to do that. But this is just a huge sustain, add sustain damage. At any time, you can switch to a target with your Purge the Wicked and just get the Mind Blast Schism on there to amp up your damage, penance them, and you can just add a lot of pressure to goes. It's really good to see who your team's target is and apply pressure to that target as well, because that will snowball pressure. That is something very important of Disc. You want to stay ahead because maybe you're not Ardred with Tree Form, but you can, sorry Guild, you can snowball pressure by just staying ahead and putting the other team behind because you have damage that converts to healing, right? Okay, so Purge the Wicked is a huge part of that, and we'll be talking about this kind of mechanic the entire time to really reinforce it. Purge the Wicked does a huge amount of damage and a huge amount of atonement and healing as long as you have it 100% uptime on all targets that you can. And here's a buff for it. Revel and Purity. Now, when you penance as well, which I've been talking about, you can penance aggressively because it is a huge deal. You just need to know when to do it. If you have somebody at 20% health, you want to penance to heal them. If you have somebody at 80% health, you can penance the kill target. You'll heal them with Atonement, and you'll spread Purge the Wicked, which is a really nice feature. Rapture, enhancing 2 additional shields is just way too good because Rapture is a very good button, and you want it to do as much as possible. Now you have more Purge the Wicked damage and more penance damage / healing. So that's just all baked into you can see how this is very stable. It's just all buttons that you would be pressing anyway, juiced up. You don't have to worry about the Shadow Covenant line yet with the Mindbender craziness and all the smites that you would have to press. But like I said, coming the new hero talents, the Disc Shadow Hybrid, you might want to try this out, especially with this new talent added called Essence Devourer, which we'll also get to later. So many spoilers. Now you have a big haste buff from casting Power Word Shield, which you'll be pressing literally all the time, so free haste is free haste. And now you have the core aspect of the build. It's going down this left side and getting these 5 instead of going down the right side to get all this shadow stuff. So let's see what they do and why it's so good. Of course, you're getting Ultimate Penance in every Disc build. This is a monster cooldown that does so much damage and healing, puts you up in the sky. You cannot be CC'd out of it, and it gives you a massive shield. Now, it can be spell stolen off, so if you use this at absolutely no health and it gets purged or spell stolen, then you can actually just die in Ultimate Penance, but that penitence. It's very easy to call it Ultimate Penance because you're firing off penance. But it's very rare that you die in this because the healing comes out so quickly and does so much. It's just a monster button. The biggest thing is to try and juke their kick so you can actually get it off because it's a little bit of a long cast and it will be much longer when we have less haste in War Within. But it is a monster button. Remember, you want Atonement on everybody. This thing can and will do a ton of damage, and if you have Atonement on everybody by Power Word shielding them or renewing them, this button right here, renew, you could just apply Atonement to people, get into your ultimate Radiance, rather your ultimate Penitence, and if it heals them, fantastic, but if it does damage, still fantastic because it'll heal them all up to full with Atonement and do monster damage. And it does, if you've ever pressed this button, Ultimate Penitence, you know, it can win games on its own. It's incredible. So fun. So everything's going to run that. But when you get on this left side, you get fast Power Word Shields and fast Penances. So that's just baked into your core rotation, which we've already talked about. These abilities have so many mods and have so much use for keeping your team stable and the other team scared. So getting those cooldowns reduced is massive. But then you go down, get Divine Aegis. This is not super good as a talent. The one below it is so absolutely phenomenal, though it makes up for it. You don't have a lot of crit. When Power Word Shield does crit, you're going to see a monster Power Word Shield on somebody, but you don't have a lot of crits, so you don't get so much value out of this. But you sure do out of Aegis of Wrath. This is just a flat 30% buff to every Power Word Shield, including Power Word Shields that have been buffed by Rapture, and the talent right to the right of this, which is Wheel and Woe. It is just a multiplicative buff. It does decay, but the great thing about PvP is when you Power Word Shield somebody and they're attacking them, they have to go through the Power Word Shield to continue doing damage. They can't swap off of every Power Word Shield because it's such a short cooldown, made even shorter by Train of Thought. So people are going to go into the Power Word Shield. So the decaying feature doesn't really matter to you at all, because let's say they're doing all the damage to the Power Word Shield before the decay every second would have added up to the full buff of the Power Word Shield got. It's already gone from the damage that they had to do, and it would absorb the damage, which is its exact purpose, right? You understand that. That's very simple. So the but part of Aegis of Wrath really doesn't matter, and the 30% really, really does. So you have this monster Power Word Shield buff that you're going to be feeling in every single game that you play. Furthermore, you combine that with Wheel and Woe. First, to get there, you go down Blaze of Light. Blaze of Light just gives you smite and penance damage and a penance movement speed decrease. This is actually really, really nice because, like I said, you should be contributing to Ghost whenever you can. Penance doing damage is only buffed by Power of the Dark Side and Harsh Discipline. And when you have this entire setup and you launch a monster penance, and then it also slows them and then heals your entire team for a ton, and then gives you a monster Wheel and Woe. Because your penance bolts increase the damage of your next bite, which is fine, but it also increases the absorb of your next Power Word Shield, which is monstrous because it stacks up to 8 times. So that combines with this Power Word Shield buff, this Power Word Shield buff, this Power Word Shield buff, and any mastery you might have. So that's what I was talking about when I say penance into, you can kind of do it like this. I'll just pull this down for a second. You can penance, and then right at the end of the penance, clip the Power Word Shield there, and it's just going to be very, 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 very large. And you can do that as many times as you can during a game. You just kind of want to get that feel of penance into Power Word Shield every time it's off cooldown. Do you have to wait for penance to be super buff to use it? Absolutely not. Penance on cooldown, Power Word Shield on cooldown. Do it aggressively if your teammate is topped. Do it defensively and press it on him and heal him if he is in trouble. But do not wait for these buffs. You'll just be getting them all game. You'll be mind blasting when you can, when you're ahead, and you'll be getting Power of the Dark Side, and then you'll get a big pendants. And when you press Ultimate Radiance, you will get a Harsh Discipline stack, which we should talk about right now. And you don't have to just wait for all of these things to align for the perfect penance, because then you're going to be holding onto the cooldown for way too long. So penance into Power Word Shield, penance into Power Word Shield, that's the name of the game. Okay. Then we have Lenience, which is just a free 3% damage reduction for everybody. Immediately, that's a pretty small wall, but over the course of a long game, passive damage reduction is always appreciated. And finally, you have what I was just talking about. Every time you press Power Word Radiance, let me just do that real quick, you get a big buff to how many penance bolts you're going to fire, and then you can do this. And you can see how many there are, followed by Power Word Shield. And that's a huge chunk of healing and then a massive absorb. And the cool thing about rotating big heals with big absorbs is that you can top somebody and then you're buffing a heal. But unlike some classes where it's like, what do I do with this buffed heal? I already topped them. It's actually a shield. So you put it on them, and now you've really thwarted an enemy team's go by topping your teammate, but then also preventing incoming damage. And that is the Super Heals build. And it is very, very stable. You can see, again, every buff, every talent that you have is around the core mechanics of pressing Radiance, pressing Penance to heal or to do damage, pressing Power Word Shield, and it's monstrous every time you do, buffing Power Word Shield, getting Mind Blast out, getting Purge the Wicked on everybody. You have a ton of Atonement healing and a ton of damage. I can show you a breakdown right here because I just played a shuffle to make sure that I was ready. Look at that, exactly what I said. Power Word Shield, number 1, but Atonement right there at number 2, 26% of my healing. So you can see our team, I went 5-1 in this one. I have it still, right? I don't really know what the last one was, but it got me up to 25-47, which was good. It could have been 4-2, 5-1. I'm not sure. It could have even been 3-3, but it went pretty dang well because the healing is keeping up with an Ard-Druid, and Ard-Druids are the throughput masters of this game. I think if you've queued into one, you probably know that. So There you go. But this is a breakdown that looks really nice because Power Word Shield is very efficient. Atonement is extremely efficient. Honestly, maybe I could get a little bit more Penance Healing in there, but I'm certain we won this last round. So we didn't need it. So there we go. That is the Super Heals build on the right side there. Now we have, on the left side, we have the General Priest talents before we go into the Shadow Covenant. Like I said, we'll talk about that last. So what I run, of course, I go down to Shadow Word Death Duplicate, which is really, really nice because Shadow Word Death procs Atonement Healing, does a huge chunk of damage, so being able to reset it and press it twice, even if you don't finish off the player, which sometimes it won't, it doesn't hit that hard, you are, again, doing the mantra of Disc Priest. You are snowballing, right? You are keeping them in trouble while topping your team at the same time, and then they just play even more aggressively, which causes the enemy team to be even more trouble, which allows you to play more aggressively, and you can see how that's what I mean by snowball. I run the short cooldown Psychic Scream because I think everybody in the universe does. And you can also get Void Tendrils for a nice AoE root. This is interesting because it can be killed, but it also doesn't break to things that certain roots break to. So it is a nice little answer for double melee sitting on top of you. You get big Flash Heal healing because you have Flash Heal instant cast procs. And when you see them, they are like a yellow semicircle right here. And then you get an instant cast Flash Heal proc. And then you have these Flash Heal buffs. One comes from Purge the Wicked, which is why you absolutely want it on all three targets if you can. 2 is fine if you have like a mage polymorphing the healer, as you know, want to break his poly every time, right? But this will give you a huge Flash healing. That gives you more Flash healing, and all of that combines with the instant cast procs to make it kind of like almost an NS feeling button, and they can proc very often. You get on Leap of Faith, and you can get MD. Great utility, of course. MD has been in the game forever and ever and ever. You probably know exactly what it does, but if in the off chance that you're very, very new, it gets off certain magical effects, very powerful magical effects that other dispels cannot. So I can't just dispel off Divine Shield, which is Paladin's immunity to all damage in CC, but I can mass dispel it off, and Priest is the only one who can do that besides Shattering Throw, but we're not talking about that. Allows you to get off Ice Block, of course, which is very similar. And it also allows you to dispel a bunch of things at the same time, and it even allows you to dispel undispellable CC, like Cyclone. Cyclone cannot be dispelled, but it can be mass dispelled. So if you absolutely need to, it's a 2-minute cooldown, so this is no joke, but if you need to get a clone off of your teammate because you're literally about to win, maybe everybody on their team is 10% health, but they got a clone off, and that guy's the one doing all the damage, then you can MD the clone. So lots of different utility options here. You can dispel multiple dots off of a Boomkin at the same time, but be careful doing it against Aflock because the backlash of certain classes like Ellie Shaman and Aflock, which I just said, could just kill you instantly because you'll be removing them all at the same time. So there's my Mass Dispel spiel. Of course, you're getting PI, which gives a huge juice to an to an ally player, and then you get twins of this on Priestess. Everybody runs this. This is absolutely required because now it gives you PI to yourself at the same time as giving it to somebody else. So now both of you have a little mini heroism, which can, again, snowball pressure, right? I've said it 6 times. I hammer it in because that is how you play Disc. You stay ahead of things, you keep your teammates aggressive, and then you juice up their aggression and find ways to win with them. And double PI is absolutely a way to do that. I run a very bizarre talent down here. This is probably one that people maybe don't look at as much. It's Sanguine Teachings with Sanlin buffing Sanguine Teaching. This is nerfed, unfortunately, though, so I'm probably going to switch off of this come War Within. They nerfed it exactly of this pre-patch. It was higher throughout of all of Dragonflight. But what it allowed me to do, and this is a combination that is probably not going to be as relevant anymore because it's Dragonflight mechanics, but if you have Leech enchants and then this Leech talent right here, then all the healing and damage you do also comes back as a percentage of healing to you, and it's not massive, but it keeps you high into the Zone of Focus range. Zone of Focus was a mastery buff that only came when you were 90% health or higher, so all my Dragonflight friends, of course you know this. If you stay in that range, you get way more healing the entire game. But you don't want to kind of be trying to spend heals on yourself just to get you back in zone of focus. But between Atonement, Healing, and Leech, you actually stayed up there, which really gave a huge benefit. And they were never a swap target if you were staying at full health the entire game. So that is why these talents are here. But unfortunately, they did nerf them. They were probably too good in PvE. I don't really think I saw too many people playing them in PvP. But anyway, if you see the new build Come War Within with all the hero talents and all that exciting stuff, and this isn't in there, you'll know why. So now we have more Purge the Wicked damage and mana gen from Purge the Wicked. Even more reasons why you want to keep this on everybody that you possibly can. In fact, one of the biggest things that I notice about Disc Priests is that they just don't have Purge the Wicked on everybody. They let it fall off because they're panicking and they're trying to heal people, but you have to find the globals. Even when people are scared, you got to trust your big Penance Power Word Shield can top somebody, and make sure you keep Purge the Wicked on everybody, because just all the benefits you get from it is insane. Then you get Cauterizing Shadows for more healing during that. Fade damage reduction is pretty nice because, again, not making yourself not a kill target is so nice. And as a result, you want as many self-sustain options as you can, which you also get going down this line. Void Swap is really good because it's just another completely full heal that is completely unstoppable. It's on Shadow. Most of your heals are on Holy. So if you get kicked and somebody's in a lot of trouble, you can just bring them back to full, which is yet another reason why you want to be not a swap target, and also why you want to be passively topped with that Leech and that Atonement. Now you can see why I did that, because it gives Void Shift full value, which can make it upwards of a 1.6 million heal. Like I said, Essence Devourer could be crazy for the Shadow Covenant build, which we'll talk about at the very end. Powered Shield, Crystalline Reflection, this just adds more healing and more damage. And yes, it does add up, and yes, it's really good. Angelic Bulwark is yet another self-sustain button. This is actually really good. When you swap somebody, it drops you down to what health they were at. So then you get an Absorb Shield and then Powered Life yourself in Desperate Prayer. And instead of just immediately dying because you swapped, you actually have all of these features kick in. Because otherwise, swap against any good team, they would just turn their character, target you, and kill you because now you're at no health. But Void Shift brings you to a certain health pool. Then you get Angelic Bulwark, Powered Life, and Desperate Prayer, and you're actually totally fine. And swapping to you might be a mistake. Binding Heals is yet another way of keeping yourself topped the entire game, which I've said now 6 times why that's so important. So Binding Heals is very good. When you get those Flash Heal procs, you never put it on yourself, you put it on somebody else. It will give them a huge chunk of health and then return some of that to you, even more because of the Leech. And here finally we get to the Flash Heal proc. This is what it comes from, Surge of Light. It's actually not a disc thing. It is just a regular priest thing. And here it is right here. You can get it from any healing spell you cast, and any time you smite. And you can smite a lot when you're ahead to save on mana and get Atonement healing. And then you get Flash Heal procs, which you'll use to stabilize while you were doing damage. Fantastic engine of healing and damage, and that is what makes disc cook. And Power with Life, I've said this word 20 times, and now you finally get to see it on the screen. This is a button that only activates on low targets, but it is a huge rebound heal with very little cost on a cooldown. So you can't spam it when they get low, but you would press it every time they get low. Because it has that cooldown and that threshold, whenever you see this glow, which it is glowing right now, so you can actually see it as a little explanation on the screen. Whenever you see this glow, press it. There's no reason to hold it because you're wasting it. If you heal them out of the range with other buttons, then you wasted those buttons because Power with Life now no longer can be used. So it's not like you need to hold it for a rainy day, because by the time they get low again, it would have been active again anyway. So Power with Life, every single time you see it, it's really just one of those it glows, I press buttons. And that's the Super Heals build. I hope I explained that super well. I'm very, very familiar with this build. It has worked extremely well for me. Every time I swap off of it, my games go worse, and I swap back to it, and I'm like, my God, that's just a stable build. So I'm super confident that this is good information for you guys, and will only get better as War Within comes out and gives you so many more Power with Shield and Penance modifiers. I can't wait to show you that in the next video. Now let's take a look at Shadow Covenant real quick, because there's a Shadow and Disc hybrid hero talent selection that has a lot to do with this. And there's this really cool button, Essence Devourer, that goes with the whole mind bender thing, mind bender theme. So effectively what you do is you get all of those same talents before, but you have to go down the right side to get all the shadow-based stuff. And what this is going to do is it's going to juice up Mindbender to make that a go. Where the Mindbender does a lot of damage, all of it does a lot of extra healing or damage, siphoning life from people. And then also it buffs up all your shadow damage, and then it converts all your spells to shadow versions of the spells. So let's see how that works. So you've already seen all this other stuff, but now you have the namesake talent, Shadow Covenant. Casting Mindbender enters you into a Shadowy Pact, transforming Halo, which we don't care about, Divine Sword, which we don't care about, but Penance, which we absolutely do care about, into Shadow spells, increasing the damage and healing of your Shadow spells by 20%. So it's just a flat-out 20% buff to Penance. But then you get other shadow things. Like this is the one that juices it up to make it that good, Twilight Corruption. And then Atonement Healing gets even more buffed from shadow spells. So when you do that Penance aggressively, not only is the Penance doing more damage because of the buff already, but then it's doing more Atonement Healing because of the buff, allowing you to stabilize easier while playing aggressively. And then you have all this shadow damage here from the Hold Mindbender line. So Mindbender is a much shorter cooldown. You can see it's a minute cooldown rather than Shadow Fiend, which is 3 minutes. It still generates mana and it still does damage. But then you can get it a shorter cooldown with Void Summoner. And then every time you're doing damage while your Mindbender is doing damage, it teleports behind the target like a, nothing personal, kid, and then slashes them for a bunch of damage and then extends the duration so it can continue doing damage. All of which then attacks from your Mindbender siphon life. So you are now healing players even more when you're doing all of these things with your Mindbender, and the more you can extend it, the more healing you get. And then all of that synergizes, like I said, 16 times with a Shadow Disc version of the hero talents that are not unlocked yet. So all of this together is going to it's going to really lock you in. So this is not stable. This is a little scary because you're going to have to be doing damage the entire time. Will your throughput be crazy if you get to do damage? Absolutely, because of all this atonement healing that's been buffed and buffed and buffed. Your throughput, both healing and damage, is going to be very high. But if you're getting locked down, or you're getting CC'd, and you're trying to stabilize coming out of that, you might fall behind a little bit. So we'll see. Is there going to be a hyper-aggressive playstyle for Disc with the new hero talents, or will people stay with a build similar to this one, where you just make sure that Power Word Shield is the biggest button in the game with all of these talents? But Shadow Covenant, I promised I would talk about it. It is definitely a build. It has been played. There were some tier sets that benefited it, but they were actually kind of bad tier sets. So it never really showed off its true power. We'll see if hero talents do end up showing off its true power. And there you go. Hopefully I hammered that in. We finally have PvP talents and then rotation. PvP talents are pretty fun. You get Ultimate Radiance instant cast. That's just really, really important because Ultimate Radiance not being an instant cast means you'll get kicked on both schools at the same time. It is Radiant, right? So it is Holy Shadow. Or Holy Fire, rather. So if you get kicked on it, you're getting kicked on Holy. And now all of a sudden, you're also kicked on Purge the Wicked, which is also Radiant. So you could only cast Shadow spells, but you can see on your bar which one of these are healing buttons, right? Penance. Only during Shadow Covenant would they be. But anyway, the instant cast AoE heal is just monstrous. So there you go. I've kicked people on Radiance before when they weren't running this at very, very low MMRs playing with viewers, and they die instantly. Then Inner Light and Shadow, very, very fantastic. Gives you more spell damage and more atonement healing, and I don't even need to tell you a 50th time why that's important to your class. Now I'm running Dark Arc because it's fun, because you just juice up people's go during Shuffle, and then during pre-patch, Ellies have been everywhere. And an Ellie with a PI in Dark Arc, if you've played into some Ellies, you know what I'm talking about. It's just disgusting. So an Ellie with PI and Dark Arc is a force. But what I actually tend to run, and I know this is not the biggest, there's so many things. You can run Catharsis for an extra bunch of damage and atonement healing. You can run Phase Shift, which is, I think, the preferred choice for almost everybody, which just gives you an answer to CC. Or you can Fade and run at people, get a movement speed increase and fear them, and they can't counter fear you or counter CC you because you're faded, so they can't attack you. Mind Games is now a PvP talent, and they're juicing it up accordingly. So this button is big. It does a bunch of it's like old Venthyr Covenant Mind Games. It is a huge chunk of damage and a huge healing absorption. rather healing reflect, you could say, because it doesn't just absorb the heals, it converts it to damage. So obviously when this was part of the PvE talent tree, it had to be toned way back, but now it is once again a PvP talent, or rather it is once again a very juicy button because it's a PvP talent. So I would definitely say Phase Shift, Catharsis, and Mind Games have a ton of value. I've even seen Thought Steal into Ardruids because I think it takes Rejuve, and Thought Steal into Mage because it took Poly, so you can be very debilitating. Like, it's almost insane how many amazing talents Disc has. They even have Double Dispel, which can be used against Flame Shock on Ellie to take away all of their procs and damage as well. You could just spam Dispel the entire game. So Disc maybe has some of the most PvP talent options, but I finally got to get to the one that I choose all the time. This, I think, is underrated, or maybe more people run it than I think, and I just don't see those people. This is a 1 minute cooldown avatar, unnerfed avatar. It is, except for healers, right? Instead of doing more damage, it's doing more healing. 20% more healing and absorption effects. That's just 20% to everything. 20% to everything you do, right? On top of all the power word shield buffs that you already had, now you get this Archangel on a 1 minute cooldown for 15 seconds. And now you have yet another multiplier to not only all healing, but those huge power word shields. And it refreshes the duration of Atonement, which is huge because now you can just press this button, top everybody with the extra 20% healing, and then do damage because they all have max Atonement on them, and you can just throughput, and your throughput is even buffed because guess what? Atonement is healing, and healing is buffed by 20%. So this is just a remarkable button. Every time I played Disc when I was 2700 MMR, every time I queued up, I have to have Archangel because a 1 minute save like this I feel like it's just underrated. It's 1 minute cooldown, guys. I mean, most offensives that are 1 minute do very specific things. They don't increase everybody's healing, right? Like your healing done to everybody. Maybe it would just like help one person out one time. Anyway, Archangel is absolutely fantastic. I use it all the time. I really think you should try it. Okay, great. So there's your PvP talents. There's your PvE talents. That's everything I could talk about there. Now we're going to talk about some rotational stuff. So I actually already told you the biggest deal, which I think is maximizing Wheel and Woe value, which is just penance into Powered Shield on cooldown. Not letting yourself wait for all of this. So here's that super glowy proc. Ooh, that's so exciting, right? And Mind Blast. There's that Power the Dark Side proc. And this is a juiced up penance. Like when you press this, that is a saucy penance. But if you wait for all three of those things to be up before you press it, you're wasting a ton of penance cooldowns, right? What you actually have to do is penance on cooldown into Power Word Shield on cooldown, and make sure you penance first for the Wheel and Woe buff. What you obviously want to do is keep Purge the Wicked on 3 guys, just like this. And then when you press Radiance, you can see Atonement Healing, Atonement Healing, Atonement Healing, Atonement Healing. That's just passive healing from passive damage. But then when you Mind Blast and Penance, Atonement Healing, Atonement Healing, Atonement Healing, right? So that's what Atonement looks like. It's you, and look at this, Shadow Word Death. Oh, didn't have it up. Shadow Word Death, you can see Monster Atonement Healing as well, right? So that's what your damage rotation healing people actually looks like. You saw all the green numbers on the screen. Does a ton of healing. I mean, that's just fantastic. And it's all scaling up no matter how many targets there are, right? This is not just a single target, right? You're doing single target damage with your rotation, but AoE healing. So you're keeping multiple people topped at once. Again, here's that penance into Power Word Shield. Here's that Flash of Light proc. You saw it right there. That's what I was talking about so many times. You want to use that Flash of Light proc. This is actually a really important rotational tip. You want to use that Flash Heal proc every time maybe they're like 60 to 70% health. Do not let teammates get low. If people are 50% health, penance into Powered Shield on them. Don't bother doing damage right there. If you have a Flash Heal proc and people are 60% health, spend it and then Powered Shield them, right? Keep alternating these buttons. You don't need to let people get low and then top them like Ardruid, who has so much throughput that you let people go low, and then NS let people go low, Swiftbend Regrowth, right? Over and over and over. You don't have that kind of healing. What you have is throughput, sustain healing. A bunch of small numbers that add up as long as you're doing your rotation properly, and then on cooldown, you have ways of just juicing up one guy, right? So here's, by the way, look at his buff. There you go. There's that atonement healing reset from Archangel, and now all of a sudden all my healing is going to be absolutely crazy. You can see this meter go up just with one penance. Whoa, whoa, look at that. Obviously, you'll never do that much healing in a game, but you can see just how much atonement healing plus penance buff, and here's yet another juiced up penance, atonement healing, atonement healing, atonement healing. And that's really what this build is all about. You can see as far as heals go, as long as you're keeping Purge the Wicked up, Mind Blast Penance when you can play aggressive, Shadow or Death when you can, Smite if you have absolutely nothing else to do, using Flash Heal procs when they're 60 to 70% health, and when they dip down all the way to 50% Penance, into Power Word Shield. If they're really, really low, you throw in a Power Word Life. If you have to cast, you want that to be your last priority. Once you start spam casting Flash Heals, you're in trouble, but sometimes you absolutely have to do it. Now, there are other ways. That's the whole throughput engine. I talked about it during the talent section. I talked about it right now. But there are other ways, and this is the most important part of this entire video, I think. There are other ways to stop people from all getting too low, and then you're like, well, I have to start hard casting because I don't have any procs right now, and then the hard casting destroys your mana, and you can't even get these. Look at this. This is not topping people. Right? That's it. When people are taking hundreds of thousands of damage per second from two guys, you casting Flash Heal is not what you want to be doing. So there are other ways to stop that from happening. And that's your amazing defenses. That's this big ass button on all of these training dummies right now, right? What you need to do is perfectly rotate your defensives into what the other team is doing. Do not rotate your defensives into their health pools, right? That is the biggest advice I could ever give as a player of this game, both as DPS and healer. If you wait for somebody to get 20% health and you go, oh no, they're low health, I got to use a defensive cooldown. No, it's already too late. You wasted that opportunity, right? You don't want to dome somebody at 20% health. You want to dome their offensive cooldowns. If you see combustion and there's a kidney shot, that's Rogue Mage Go, right? Which means even if your partner is 95% health, throw the dome down on it, right? Throw the dome down, especially back when RMP was a pad comp that did Flame Strike and all that crazy AoE damage. I think that's finally long gone, but that would have been a crazy play, right? Dome them at 90% health, completely shut down the go. If you wait and they take a ton of damage and then you dome them, they're going to die through it, because what you're doing is you're saying Powered Shield is a heal. It's not a heal, right? It is damage reduction. You need to dome the incoming damage. Now, unfortunately, RMP has incredible swaps, so they can get to another target. Hopefully, maybe that guy can get into the dome as well. In fact, dome is actually better than Paints up there, because if he does swap, he can get into the dome, and now you've maybe covered that swap. If they swap to you, you're a pretty tough swap target for all the talents and stuff that I talked about. But anyway, that's way better than just saying, oh, you died through dome. How did that happen? Because you pressed it at 10%, right? Okay, so that's one big thing. That also applies to DK Go, right? Avatar, TSG, Avatar, A-Bomb Limb. They pull you all into a pile. You're all 80% health. You're like, well, maybe I can heal through this. No, you cannot. Just dome it there at the 80% health when you're all grouped up and protect the go. If you try and heal through it and then have to dome anyway, now you've wasted all your buttons and you've probably panicked. You've had the Trinket, you had the Desperate Prayer, you had the Rapture, you did all these things, right? Paints Up is the exact same way, by the way, but instead of like Area Effect Denial, where they can't swap very well, or you can disrupt a limb go, or maybe a spear go, where everything is stacked up and you can stop it all at once, Paints Up is like the button where this is the guy that's going to take the damage, right? They cross CC his teammate to peel, right? Maybe the one guy's in a poly or a clone, and then it's just you and that guy, and they're sending huge damage into him because you see it. You see this is Incarn from a Boomkin. Chaos Bolts are flying out. We don't have a stop because one of our guys cloned. Just Paints Up right there. 70% health, it's fine. 60% health, a little lower. Once you start dipping below 30% health, right? Unless you can pair it with Powered Life, a Penance, and a Shield, then maybe you can get more value out of it, but you can actually just prevent the damage from coming in the first place with Paints Up at high health. Well, I implore you, right, to see in a shuffle where you start Paints Upping people low and then they just rot to death anyway, and you're like, what is happening? I'm using my buttons and it just doesn't matter. That may be exactly why. What I'm telling you right now, all of this spiel. Finally, you have one more super important button, Rapture. Like I said when I was talking about the talent, get this on cooldown. Don't hold on to Rapture the entire game. This is a shorter cooldown, just like Archangel is a shorter cooldown. Use those buttons early to keep people, this is the concept of Disc, this is the final time I say it, you keep people topped so you can play aggressive, get them lower, which keeps your teammates even more topped and gets them even lower because now they're playing more aggressive. When people are at 100% health in solo shuffle, they dive in, they do damage, they apply pressure. When you're panicked and behind, they sit on pillars and they get rotted to death behind pillars or cleaved to death behind pillars, and now you're even further behind, and Disc doesn't like that. So use things like Rapture and Archangel to keep your team always shielded, always at 100% health, and have you doing as much damage and atonement healing as possible. So, what did we learn? Pain Sup high. Second Pain Sup charge high. Dome, area effect denial, important abilities and important offensive cooldowns like Avatar and A-Bomb Limb and Spear and Combustion and any type of RMP go, any type of cleave, right? Rapture and Archangel as fast and early into the game as possible to make sure that they're on cooldown, so when they come back up again, you can just keep using them in rotationally like that, keeping people juiced. Or do you press all of your buttons in one shot, in one macro, all at the same time? Of course not. That would be a really foolish thing to take away from all this. It just means you go through things one after another to rotate through your defensives before things get hairy. If you find yourself with 3 people at 30% health and you have Rapture, Archangel, and 2 charges of Pain Sup, you're not listening to this advice, right? Or if you are 5 seconds into the game and both of these are gone, right? And then that's gone too, then I'm not really sure how that happened, right? Because it's only been 5 seconds, right? So now you have information, hopefully rotational information, cooldown-based information that can help you. The one button is the final thing of this entire video that you actually do look at the health bar for. None other than Life Swap, right? This is not a button you need to pre-press. That would be crazy. You generally save it as a last resort, Trinket Swap, right? That's on the, Trinket Swap, you had Trinket Swap, right? As a last resort for, hey, I got no way of getting you up, but I can give you all of my health to give you one more health pool they have to go through, right? If they have to go through one more health pool, maybe they've run out of juice, and now it's your team's last chance in that round to win the shuffle round, right? And that's Disc Priest. I hope that helped. I really hope that information makes sense and is useful to you, and let me know in the comments. I'll do whatever I can to make it better in the future. Thank you. Okay, GG's.